Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Dick Price, talking to you about you and your business. Got the one, the only Tony Powers here on the phone. He's with italkus.com, the nationally syndicated company, providing great radio content around the country and probably around the world. And you're out there in Georgia and South Carolina, correct?
That's right, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Love the great work you do, and we always have a blast, and I get great feedback about getting you back on, so I'm always eager to do that. Tell me a little bit about what you guys are talking about over there at iTalk US.
Well, you know, the immigration border crisis / Obama creates new Democrats crisis is, I guess, the big thing that everybody's talking about. You know, the funny thing, Kevin, is just a few months ago in January, only 3% of the people actually cared anything about this immigration thing. Now it is the leading topic that people are talking about. Do you think Obama has accomplished what he really wanted to do, is putting this comprehensive immigration reform on the front burner instead of the back burner?
Yeah, but, you know, at the same time, a vast majority of them think he's mishandling it.
Well, sure, he's mishandling it, but he's changed the subject. I mean, you know, this is something that we've been talking about on my program, is how this administration is able to change the subject at will, and the press just goes right along with it. You know, we were talking about the IRS scandal, and then suddenly the VA scandal came upon us. And then just as Shinseki was resigning from the VA scandal, suddenly we had Bergdahl's parents appearing in the Rose Garden. And when that became a problem for the administration, suddenly we've got thousands of kids crossing our border down in Texas and coming into the country illegally there. It's just like one right after another. And I call them methods of mass distraction. And I don't think the people can keep up with this. In the meantime, the thing that was going to give the Republicans victory in November, that was assuredly the defeat of big government and this administration's plans to socialize our country, Obamacare, nobody's talking about it anymore.
Nobody's talking about it. Yeah, I call him the distractor-in-chief. It's funny you should say that. You know, he is the distractor-in-chief, and he knows how to do it. And it's very easy when you have government-controlled media. I didn't say necessarily government-financed media, although I'm curious to see how much of that may be going on, because you don't get this. No corporation through its advertising has this kind of influence over the media. So you got to sit there and wonder. But it really is government-controlled media. You know, and I don't have any problem with the media being critical of Republicans, and especially the group of Republicans that are trying to lead the country today. You know, and when George Bush was in charge, I was one of his strongest critics. It's the job of responsible media to be critical of government, regardless of party, period. Don't you think, honestly?
Well, yeah, and we were having a discussion about this the other day. I mean, there are so many Pulitzer Prizes waiting for some new Bernsteins out there who would actually go after some of these stories. Think of the IRS scandal alone. I mean, there you have a Pulitzer Prize waiting for some industrious journalist who is willing to go out there, do some digging, and find out the truth in that case. And yet the media ignores it. The same with the VA. I mean, they should be parading people on television across the country at small stations and cities and towns all across America and showing these veterans who are suffering because of the policies of the Veterans Administration. Yet they're not doing it, and nobody is doing investigative journalism the way it used to be done. And in 60 Minutes, where are they on this? I mean, we've got a real crisis that has been created by this president on our border in Texas and Arizona and now all across the country as they ship these folks to places that we have no idea where they're going. And yet we have a very uninterested media.
No, you're right. It couldn't be less interested. It could not be more bored. It basically wants to, it continues to want to create history. I think there's a concern among the more ideologued liberal in media. Well, let's face it, that's the vast majority, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest. That because of the incompetence of this administration, that there's a chance that a black president could be a one-hit wonder. And I really believe that there's this concern that the American people won't want to have it, test these waters again. The reality is there's a ton of outstanding black leaders who govern, I think, with great competency. But the media certainly doesn't want to give attention to any of those because, they love blacks as long as they're liberal blacks.
Oh, yeah. Well, look at Dr. Ben Carson. He's got the number one best-selling book out there right now, and he is being ignored by the mainstream media. And I actually see him. I saw a poll the other day where he was like second, coming in second as a possible presidential contender for the Republican Party. And yet you don't hear a lot of coverage of Ben Carson and what he has to say about his new book. It's far outselling Hillary's book. And I think in a head-to-head contest, he would be a great president.
No, he'd be a fantastic president. Very sensible, very limited government-minded. But guys like him are not going to get the time of day by the media because the media is really for blacks as long as they're liberal blacks and for Hispanics. In fact, they are more hostile. They in the media are more hostile towards conservative minorities than they are to white conservatives, because conservatives who are among the minority populations are a threat to progressivism. They're an existential threat to progressivism, in my opinion. And in addition to that, there's this mentality out there, Tony. I'd like to get your comment on this. There's this mentality out there that since it was progressive policies, they gave political power to minorities. Minorities should have to worship at that altar into infinity.
Well, the funny thing is when you do have somebody in the minority community who is a success, like Ben Carson has been, who has created a successful life, rather than celebrating that and putting him on a pedestal and saying, well, look at what this guy has done with the American dream, and look at what our programs has produced. And rather than saying that, oh, well, Ben Carson is a great example of the American dream and how anybody in this country can make it, well, they want to demean him. And you're absolutely right. Any coverage they give him is not going to be positive. It's going to be negative. They'll cover him, but they'll cover him in a negative way.
Yeah, and they'll be on page 10 and not the front page. My friend Tony Powers on italkus.com, but I'd like you to comment on my theory. What do you think about this? I really honestly believe that liberals in media believe that conservatives, that minorities rather, have no business being conservative because they wouldn't even have the right to vote if it weren't for progressive policies. What do you think about that?
Well, I find that kind of incredible, again, because you would think that they would say, well, because of our policies, we do have these minorities who are being successful, and you would think that they would celebrate their success. But instead of doing that, they want to attack them, and they have to, because if these are people who should be, in their mind, just loyal to them. But the fact is, if you look at what's happening in the African-American community today and what the policies of this president and the progressives have done to the African-American community, it's the African-Americans who aren't leaving the Democrat Party and the progressive movement that I'm concerned about, because obviously they have brainwashed these folks and they are just trapped in circumstances that are out of their control because they have to rely on big government for their daily bread. Yeah.
We're going to have to take a break. Tony Powers, he is phenomenal, good friend of this program. italkus.com. I always enjoy being on his show as well. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about what things are there things the GOP can do to change this debate. Until the New Deal, the GOP pretty much had the black population locked in, thanks to the fact that we were the leaders in the release of slavery, end of slavery. Although one could debate about how we did that, but nonetheless. And so, is there a way? Is there a way to change the paradigm, change the debate? We're going to talk about that and much, much more here on our program with the one and only Tony Powers, right here on The Price of Business.